The sun was setting over Atlanta's bustling streets as Michael pulled into his driveway, a warm smile spreading across his face. He ran his fingers along the slightly faded black paint of his 2012 Honda Civic, a car that represented countless early mornings stocking shelves at the local grocery store and late evenings tutoring younger kids from the neighborhood. For 2 years straight, he'd saved every dollar, living on instant noodles and turning down hangouts with friends just to make this dream come true. His mom, a petite woman with kind eyes and graying hair at her temples, watched proudly from their modest front porch. She'd raised him alone since he was 5, working 2 jobs while running a community center that helped troubled teens find their way. When Michael first mentioned wanting to buy a car, she didn't just hand him money. She taught him about budgeting, helped him research reliable models, and made sure he understood the responsibility that came with owning a vehicle. Their neighborhood wasn't the fanciest, but it was tight-knit. The elderly couple next door had watched Michael grow up, and the owner of the corner store always saved him the day-old pastries when he'd stop by after his morning shift. Everyone knew how hard he'd worked for this car. Even Mr. Thompson, his high school physics teacher, had given him extra credit assignments so he could maintain his grades while working those long hours. That afternoon, Michael had his SAT prep class, the final stepping stone in his plan to become the first person in his family to attend college. He'd been studying for months, determined to score high enough for a scholarship. The test was just 2 weeks away, and he wasn't going to let anything derail his preparations. Before heading to class, he decided to stop at the corner store for some brain food. His usual mix of granola bars and that weird green tea his mom swore helped with concentration. The parking lot was mostly empty except for 3 motorcycles parked near the entrance, their engines still ticking as they cooled down. Inside the store, Michael nodded hello to Mrs. Park behind the counter. She'd been running the place for over 20 years and still remembered his favorite candy from when he was a kid. As he browsed the aisles, he noticed 3 guys in leather jackets watching him through the store's security mirrors. Something about their presence made the hair on the back of his neck stand up, but he brushed it off. His mom always said worry was just imagination using its powers for evil. He paid for his snacks, exchanging his usual friendly banter with Mrs. Park about her grandson's latest baseball game. But when he pushed open the glass door, the warm afternoon air suddenly felt thick with tension. The 3 bikers had positioned themselves strategically around his car, and the biggest one, a guy with a scraggly beard and faded tattoos creeping up his neck, was leaning against Michael's driver's side door. Michael's heart began to race, but his mind stayed surprisingly clear. His mom's voice echoed in his head. Never let fear make your decisions. He remembered how she'd insisted on installing a comprehensive security system in the car, even though it meant eating rice and beans for an extra month to afford it. At the time, he'd thought she was being overprotective. But now, he clutched his car keys tightly, feeling the rough edges of the metal dig into his palm. The past 2 years of hard work, early mornings, and sacrifices flashed through his mind. But more than that, he thought about his mom, who'd probably start worrying if he was even 5 minutes late getting home. He thought about his upcoming SAT class, about the kids he tutored who looked up to him, about all the people in his life who'd helped him get to this point. The biggest biker pushed himself off the car and took a step forward, his boots scraping against the sun-baked asphalt. The other 2 started moving too, and Michael could see something metallic glinting in one of their hands. In that moment, time seemed to slow down, and Michael had to make a decision that would change not just his afternoon, but the lives of everyone involved. Want me to continue with part 2? The big biker's voice was rough, like gravel under tires, as he demanded Michael's keys. Behind him, the second guy kept glancing nervously at the store's windows, while the third one, shorter but muscular, cracked his knuckles with practiced menace. The metallic object in the nervous one's hand turned out to be a small knife, its blade catching the late afternoon sun. Michael's throat felt dry, but his mom's self-defense lessons kicked in. Stay calm, assess the situation, And remember, sometimes giving up something small means living to fight another day. With trembling fingers, he held out his keys, watching as the big biker snatched them with a triumphant smirk. What the thieves didn't know was that this seemingly simple car theft was about to become anything but simple. Just last month, Michael's uncle, a detective with 15 years on the force, had helped them install a state-of-the-art security system. It wasn't just your basic car alarm. This thing had GPS tracking, a remote engine kill switch, and a silent alert system that would notify both the police and Michael's phone the moment anyone unauthorized tried to start the engine. The bikers piled into the car, with Knuckle Cracker taking the wheel. As they peeled out of the parking lot, Mrs. Park burst out of the store, already on the phone with 911. Michael pulled out his own phone, his hand steadier now, and opened the tracking app his uncle had set up. A small blue dot showed his car heading east, toward the industrial district. Within minutes, Michael's uncle called. He was already coordinating with patrol units in the area. "Stay put," he told Michael. "We've got eyes on them." But Michael wasn't the only one who'd seen what happened. Word spread fast in their neighborhood. And soon, several of the local business owners and residents who'd watched Michael grow up were in their cars, following the GPS coordinates his uncle shared. The bikers, feeling cocky about their easy score, didn't notice anything unusual at first. They were laughing, probably already planning how to strip the car for parts or sell it quick. But their laughter died when they turned onto Washington Street and saw 3 police cruisers up ahead. They made a sharp turn, tires squealing, only to find more patrol cars approaching from the other direction. Panic set in. The big biker was yelling at Knuckle Cracker to drive faster, while the nervous one kept looking back at their pursuers. They turned down a narrow street lined with warehouses, thinking they knew these back roads better than the cops. What they didn't expect was for the car's engine to suddenly sputter and die. The security system had done its job. The kill switch, activated remotely, left them stranded in front of an old furniture warehouse. As they tried desperately to restart the engine, they realized they were trapped. Police cars blocked both ends of the street, and to their growing horror, they saw several familiar faces from the neighborhood among the gathering crowd. One of these faces belonged to an older man they recognized, the father of a kid who turned his life around thanks to the community center run by Michael's mom. The same center where Michael volunteered, teaching computer skills to younger kids who couldn't afford after-school programs. The same center where, ironically, one of the biker's own younger brothers had found help staying off the streets just 6 months ago. The reality of what they'd done started sinking in. They hadn't just tried to steal any car. They'd tried to steal from someone who, indirectly, had helped their own community. The big biker's tough guy facade cracked first, his shoulders slumping as he watched more community members arrive. The nervous one had dropped his knife, hands shaking as he raised them in surrender. Even Knuckle Cracker, who'd been so confident earlier, looked like he might be sick. As police lights flashed against the warehouse walls and the sun dipped lower in the sky, the 3 men sat in the car they'd stolen, waiting for the inevitable. But what they didn't know was that their story was far from over, and the next few minutes would change their lives in ways they never expected. Should I continue with part 3? The police moved in swiftly but calmly, their weapons lowered as they approached the disabled car. The 3 bikers emerged with their hands up, their earlier bravado completely gone. The big one's eyes were red and wet, while the nervous one couldn't stop shaking. Even the tough-looking one who'd been cracking his knuckles earlier looked like a deflated balloon. As they were being cuffed, a familiar minivan pulled up. Michael stepped out with his mom, and the crowd parted to let them through. The sight of them made the big biker's face crumple even more. He recognized Michael's mom from the community center's basketball court, where she'd spent countless weekends organizing games to keep kids off the streets. She'd even helped his cousin find a job last summer. Michael's mom didn't yell or curse at them. Instead, she walked right up to the 3 men, her eyes filled with disappointment rather than anger. "I know each of your families," she said quietly, but her words carried across the now silent street. "I know your struggles, your stories. We could have helped you if you'd just asked." The nervous one broke down completely then, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "We didn't know. We didn't think." His voice trailed off as he realized how weak his excuses sounded. The other two couldn't even meet her eyes, their shame evident in their slumped shoulders and bowed heads. What happened next surprised everyone. Michael stepped forward, standing next to his mom. He looked at the three men who'd tried to steal his car, the car he'd worked so hard for, and spoke with a maturity beyond his years. "That car isn't just for me," he explained. "I bought it so I could drive kids to the community center for free tutoring. Some of them walk 2 miles each way because their parents work late." The revelation hit the thieves like a physical blow. They hadn't just tried to steal a car. They tried to steal opportunity from kids who needed it most. The big biker, who'd seemed so intimidating earlier, let out a sound that was somewhere between a sob and a groan. Michael's uncle, the detective, had been watching all this unfold. He'd seen enough cases go through the system to know that sometimes justice needed a different approach. After a quick discussion with his fellow officers and a call to the precinct, he proposed something unexpected. Instead of pressing for maximum charges, they could work with the DA's office to get the three men into a rehabilitation program. The crowd watched as Michael and his mom huddled with the officers, discussing options. Some of the onlookers were skeptical. These men had tried to commit a crime, after all. But others remembered their own second chances, the times when someone's faith in them had made all the difference. Finally, Michael's mom turned back to the three men. "If you're willing to work for it," she said, "we're willing to help you turn this around. But it won't be easy. You'll have to earn back the community's trust." The thieves looked at each other, then back at her, hardly daring to believe what they were hearing. The nervous one spoke first, his voice stronger now despite his tear-stained face. "We'll do anything," he promised. "Just give us a chance to make it right." As the sun set over the warehouse district, casting long shadows across the gathered crowd, something shifted in the air. What had started as a simple car theft had transformed into something else entirely. A moment of transformation, not just for the three would-be thieves, but for everyone watching. It was a reminder that sometimes the worst decisions can lead to the best opportunities for change. The police began to disperse the crowd, but everyone knew this story wasn't over. It was just beginning to take a different turn, one that would ripple through their community in ways none of them could have predicted. Would you like me to continue with part 4? The next few weeks were a whirlwind of court appearances, paperwork, and difficult conversations. The three bikers, who turned out to be brothers, sat through hearing after hearing, their leather jackets traded for clean button-down shirts borrowed from the community center's clothing drive. Michael and his mom attended every session, speaking up about their belief in second chances. At first, some people thought they were being too soft. "They pulled a knife," critics would say. "They need to learn a hard lesson." But Michael's mom had seen too many young lives ruined by harsh punishments that offered no path to redemption. She worked with the court to design a program that combined community service, job training, and mandatory counseling. The oldest brother, the big one who'd first demanded Michael's keys, turned out to be raising 2 teenage siblings on his own after their parents passed away. The middle brother, the nervous one with the knife, had lost his job 6 months ago and couldn't find new work with his previous record. The youngest, the knuckle-cracker, had dropped out of high school to help support the family. Their story started spreading through the neighborhood, passed along at barbershops and bus stops. People began offering what they could. The auto shop owner promised apprenticeships, the grocery store manager mentioned needing stockers for the night shift, and the community center's computer lab opened its doors for GED prep classes. Michael's car became a symbol of something bigger than just transportation. Every morning, he'd drive past the auto shop where the oldest brother was learning to be a mechanic. Sometimes, he'd spot the middle brother heading to his new job at the grocery store, walking with his head held higher each day. The youngest had enrolled in GED classes and was showing a surprising talent for math. One particularly memorable afternoon, Michael pulled into the community center's parking lot to find all three brothers washing his car. They'd asked his mom's permission to do it, wanting to show their gratitude in some small way. The oldest brother had even fixed a rattling sound in the engine that Michael hadn't noticed. The transformation wasn't instant or easy. There were setbacks, moments of frustration, old habits trying to resurface, and days when the weight of their past mistakes felt overwhelming. But something had changed in them that day when they saw an entire community come together, not to punish them, but to lift them up. Other young people in the neighborhood started paying attention. They saw how the three brothers were changing, how they carried themselves differently now. The oldest brother started sharing his story at the community center, talking honestly about the choices that had led him to that parking lot with a knife, and the choices that were helping him build a better life now. Michael's mom noticed something else changing too. More people were volunteering at the center, offering their skills and time. The incident had reminded everyone that their community was stronger when they looked out for each other, when they chose understanding over anger and hope over fear. One evening, as Michael was leaving his SAT prep class, he found a small package on his car's hood. Inside was a new steering wheel cover, clearly installed by someone who knew what they were doing. A note tucked inside read, "Thanks for giving us a chance to steer our lives in a new direction." The story could have ended very differently that day in the parking lot. It could have been just another crime statistic, another reason for people to distrust each other. Instead, it became a reminder that sometimes the worst moments can bring out the best in people, if only we're brave enough to look past our fears and see the humanity in each other. Should I continue with part 5? 3 months after the incident, the community center was busier than ever. The three brothers had become regular fixtures there, each finding their own way to give back. The oldest brother started a basic car maintenance workshop on Saturdays, teaching teenagers how to change oil and fix flat tires. His knowledge from the auto shop apprenticeship was already paying off, and the pride in his voice when he explained engine parts was unmistakable. The middle brother, once so nervous he could barely make eye contact, now helped run the center's food pantry. He used his experience from the grocery store to organize donations and stretch resources, making sure every family got what they needed. People who remembered him from that day with the knife sometimes did a double take, seeing how he transformed from someone who took from the community to someone who helped feed it. The youngest brother's change was perhaps the most striking. After earning his GED with top scores, he started tutoring other students in math. The same hands that had once cracked threateningly now held pencils, patiently showing kids how to solve equations. He had a special way with the troublemakers, maybe because he saw his old self in them. Michael's mom had turned their story into a formal program at the center, calling it the Second Chance Initiative. Local businesses signed up to offer job training. Retired teachers volunteered to help with education, and even the police department sent officers to build better relationships with the community. One day, Michael found all three brothers waiting by his car after school. His heart skipped for a second, remembering their first meeting, but their smiles quickly put him at ease. They'd wanted to share some news. The oldest brother had been promoted to junior mechanic. The middle one was taking night classes in business management, and the youngest had been accepted to community college. "We've been saving up," the oldest brother said, pulling out an envelope. Inside was money they'd earned from their jobs, not to repay the car, they explained, but to start a scholarship fund for other kids who needed help turning their lives around. Michael's mom cried when they presented it at the next community center meeting. The local newspaper caught wind of the story and sent a reporter. At first, everyone was nervous about publicity, but the brothers insisted on being honest about their past and their change. "If our story helps one person choose a better path," the middle brother said, "then it's worth sharing." The article sparked something unexpected. Other neighborhoods started reaching out, wanting to learn about the Second Chance Initiative. Michael and his mom found themselves invited to speak at community meetings across the city. The three brothers sometimes joined them, their presence living proof that transformation was possible. Michael's car, which had started this whole journey, became known throughout the neighborhood. Kids would wave when they saw it pass, knowing it might be heading to pick up students for tutoring. The brothers had gotten together and replaced its fading paint job as a surprise, making it shine like new. But more importantly, they'd helped turn it from a target of theft into a symbol of hope. One evening, as Michael drove home from dropping off some tutoring students, he passed the corner store where everything had happened. Mrs. Park was outside watering her flowers, and the three brothers were helping her carry in some heavy boxes. The sight made him smile, remembering how different things had been just a few months ago. His mom always said that forgiveness was like a key. It could either lock away your pain or unlock new possibilities. That day in the parking lot, they'd chosen to unlock something powerful, the possibility that people could change, that mistakes didn't have to define you, and that sometimes the worst moments could lead to the best transformations. Would you like me to continue with Part 6? As winter approached, the community center buzzed with activity. The Second Chance initiative had grown beyond anyone's expectations. The three brothers' story had inspired others who'd lost their way to seek help. The oldest brother's car maintenance workshop now had a waiting list, with people coming from neighboring districts just to learn from him. One cold morning, Michael arrived at the center to find the middle brother organizing a coat drive. The nervous guy who'd once held a knife was now confidently directing volunteers, making sure every donated jacket found the right home. He had a special talent for remembering which families had kids who needed winter clothes, and he'd stay late making sure everyone got what they needed. The youngest brother had become something of a local legend at the community college. His math tutoring sessions were packed, but what really set him apart was how he connected with his students. Math isn't just about numbers, he'd say. It's about seeing patterns and solving problems. Just like life. The kids who struggled most in school often found their way to his study groups. Michael's mom had turned the center's small office into a career counseling space. The walls were covered with job postings, training opportunities, and success stories. The three brothers' photos were there, but now they shared the wall with dozens of others who'd found their way through the program. Each picture told a story of transformation. One evening, while Michael was helping clean up after a tutoring session, he overheard the oldest brother talking to a teenager who'd been caught shoplifting. "I know what it feels like," he said quietly, thinking that taking something is your only choice. "But let me tell you about the day I tried to steal a car and ended up finding my future instead." The middle brother had started a mentoring group for people struggling with anxiety and fear. Drawing from his own experience, he showed others how to channel their nervous energy into positive action. "The same feelings that made me hold that knife," he'd explain, "now help me notice when someone needs extra support at the food bank." The youngest brother's knuckle-cracking habit had transformed into a nervous tic of clicking his pen while solving complex equations. His GED students teased him about it, but they also respected how he'd turned his life around. He'd started a study group specifically for former dropouts, creating a safe space where people could admit what they didn't know without feeling judged. Michael's car had become something of a community vehicle. The brothers had installed a better stereo system as a thank you gift, and now it played everything from math tutorials to motivational speeches during the daily tutoring runs. The trunk usually carried a mix of textbooks, emergency snacks, and spare coats for anyone who needed them. One day, a local business owner who'd been skeptical of the Second Chance initiative stopped by the center. He watched the brothers in action, teaching, mentoring, organizing, and pulled Michael's mom aside. "I was wrong," he admitted. "I thought people couldn't change, but seeing this," he ended up offering paid internships at his company for program participants. The police officers who'd been there that day noticed a change too. The same street where they'd cornered the stolen car was now a gathering place for community events. The warehouse had been converted into a workshop space where people could learn trade skills. Even crime rates in the area had dropped as more people found support and purpose through the initiative. As Michael drove home that evening, he passed the corner store where it all began. Mrs. Park had strung up lights for the holidays, and through the window, he could see the three brothers helping her decorate. They waved as he passed, and he honked back, their usual greeting now. His mom always said that sometimes the best things in life come disguised as problems to solve. Should I continue with Part 7? Spring arrived, bringing new changes to the community. The Second Chance initiative had caught the attention of city officials, who were amazed by its success rate. But what really got their attention wasn't the statistics, it was the personal stories, starting with the three brothers who'd once tried to steal a car and now helped run programs that kept others from making similar mistakes. The oldest brother had turned the auto shop's apprenticeship program into something special. He didn't just teach about cars, he taught about life. Every engine has multiple parts working together, he'd explain to his students. Just like a community, when one part struggles, the whole thing suffers. But when we help each other, everything runs smoothly. One rainy afternoon, Michael spotted him under the hood of a beat-up truck, teaching a group of teenagers. These weren't just any kids, they were the ones other programs had given up on. But there he was, patiently explaining how to diagnose engine problems, slipping in life lessons between spark plug changes. The same hands that had once grabbed Michael's car keys now guided others toward honest work. The middle brother's transformation continued to amaze everyone. He'd started a support group for people dealing with past mistakes. Every Thursday evening, they'd gather in the community center, sharing stories and strategies. Fear used to control me, he'd tell newcomers, his voice steady now. That knife I carried was really just my fear made metal. But there's more strength in asking for help than in threatening others. The food pantry he managed had become a model for other neighborhoods. He'd developed a system where families could choose their own items with dignity, rather than just receiving pre-packed boxes. More importantly, he'd created a welcoming space where people could admit they needed help without shame. The youngest brother, once known for his intimidating presence, now had a different reputation. College students would seek him out before big exams, knowing he had a gift for making complicated things simple. I used to think strength meant making others afraid, he'd say during tutoring sessions. Now I know it means helping others become stronger. Michael's car had taken on a life of its own. The brothers had installed a small library in the trunk, books, study guides, and resources for anyone trying to better themselves. The back seat often carried dreams, college applications, job resumes, GED practice tests. It wasn't just transportation anymore. It was a mobile symbol of hope. One evening, while Michael was helping clean up after a community dinner, he found a letter left on his windshield. It was from a teenager who'd been thinking about dropping out of school. I saw those three brothers change, the letter read. If they could turn their lives around like that, maybe I can too. Can you help me sign up for tutoring? The police officers who patrolled the area noticed something else too. The same streets where they used to chase troubled youth now hosted block parties and job fairs. The warehouses that once attracted crime had become training centers. Even their own jobs had changed. They found themselves being invited to community events not as security, but as neighbors. Michael's mom had started documenting everything, collecting stories and photos of people whose lives had changed. The wall of success stories had grown so much they'd had to expand to a second wall. Each picture told a story of transformation, but everyone knew it had started with those three brothers and a stolen car that never made it past the first street. As Michael watched the community center fill up each evening with people helping each other, he thought about how close they'd come to a completely different ending. His mom always said that sometimes the worst moments in life were just doorways to something better. You just had to be brave enough to walk through them. Would you like me to continue with Part 8? The success of the Second Chance initiative had spread beyond their neighborhood, drawing visitors from other cities who wanted to learn their secrets. But the real magic wasn't in the program details. It was in the people, especially the three brothers who'd become living proof that change was possible. One sunny Saturday morning, the community center hosted its first graduation ceremony. 25 people who'd completed various programs, from GED classes to job training, sat in folding chairs, wearing borrowed caps and gowns. Among them was a teenager who'd been caught shoplifting 6 months ago, now heading to trade school, thanks to the oldest brother's mentoring. The middle brother stood at the podium, his hand steady as he addressed the crowd. The nervous guy, who once couldn't look people in the eye, was now giving speeches that brought tears to eyes. "A year ago," he said, "I thought my mistakes defined me. Now I know they just prepared me to help others avoid the same path." The food pantry had grown into a full community kitchen, where people not only got food but learned to cook healthy meals on a budget. The middle brother had started teaching finance classes too, showing others how to manage money, a skill he learned the hard way after losing everything before his attempted car theft. The youngest brother had received a surprise scholarship to finish his own education, awarded by the community college where he'd been tutoring. His students had secretly nominated him, writing letters about how his math lessons doubled as life lessons. "He taught us that every problem has a solution," one student wrote, "even when the problem is ourselves." Michael's car, now approaching its 6th year, had become a local legend. Kids would point it out. "There goes the car that changed everything." The brothers had turned their annual car wash into a community event where they'd teach basic maintenance skills while sharing their story. Even the dent in the rear bumper had a story. It happened while delivering supplies during a snowstorm to elderly residents. One day, Michael found all 3 brothers waiting by his car after school. For a moment, he flashed back to that first confrontation, but their smiles told a different story. They'd pooled their savings to create a scholarship fund for other young people seeking second chances. The fund's name: The Keys to Change. The oldest brother's auto workshop had expanded to include a small business program. He taught people not just how to fix cars, but how to build honest livelihoods. "Every broken engine is an opportunity," he'd say, "just like every mistake is a chance to rebuild something better." Local businesses that had once been skeptical now competed to hire program graduates. The auto shop where the oldest brother worked had a waiting list of apprentices. The grocery store where the middle brother started had created a management training program specifically for people with troubled pasts. The police department had noticed such a significant drop in neighborhood crime that they'd started sending officers from other precincts to learn about the initiative. The same detective who'd coordinated the car theft response now led workshops on community-based policing, using their story as a model for positive change. As Michael drove home that evening, he passed the corner store where it all began. The store's sign now included a small notice: "Proud supporter of second chances." Inside, Mrs. Park was teaching the brothers how to make her famous kimchi, a skill she'd never shared before. They'd become like sons to her, helping with deliveries and keeping an eye on the store during late hours. The warehouse district had transformed too. The dead-end street where the car chase ended now hosted a weekly farmers market. The walls that once witnessed their surrender now displayed murals painted by program participants, each telling a story of transformation. Should I continue with Part 9? 1 year to the day after the attempted car theft, the community center hosted a special celebration, not just for the program's success, but for something bigger, a change in how people saw each other. The 3 brothers stood near the entrance, greeting people they'd once might have threatened, now exchanging warm handshakes and genuine smiles. The oldest brother had just received his full mechanic certification. The auto shop owner had promoted him to lead trainer, putting him in charge of teaching new apprentices. His first class included 3 teenagers who'd been caught stealing cars. "I see my old self in them," he told Michael's mom. "But now I can show them a better way to use their hands." The middle brother had completed his business management course with honors. The grocery store had made him assistant manager, and he'd started a program helping other employees continue their education. The same nervous energy that once made him grip a knife now drove him to help others build secure futures. The youngest brother's math students had achieved the highest test scores in the district. But more impressive were the letters from parents, thanking him for believing in kids everyone else had given up on. His old habit of cracking his knuckles had been replaced by a collection of fidget cubes, which he shared with anxious students during exam prep. Michael's car had needed a new transmission recently. When he worried about the cost, all three brothers showed up at the auto shop on their day off. They worked together, teaching Michael about car repair while sharing stories about their own journey. By sunset, the car was running better than ever, and Michael understood both engines and forgiveness a little better. The corner store had become a kind of unofficial community hub. Mrs. Park had expanded her inventory to include supplies for the center's programs. The security mirrors that once reflected suspicious glances now watched over community meetings and study groups. Even the parking lot where it all started had been repainted with hopeful messages in bright colors. That evening, as people gathered for the celebration, Michael's mom shared some big news. The city had approved funding to expand the Second Chance initiative to other neighborhoods. But more importantly, they'd hired the three brothers as program coordinators, recognizing that their experience made them the best possible leaders for the expansion. The police chief stood up to speak, but instead of talking about crime statistics, he told a story about transformation. He described how his own perspective had changed, seeing firsthand how support and opportunity could accomplish what punishment alone never could. The three brothers sat in the front row, their eyes bright with unshed tears. As the celebration continued, Michael noticed something profound. The fear that once divided their community had been replaced by something stronger, understanding. People who might have crossed the street to avoid each other now sat together, sharing meals and making plans for the future. His car, parked outside, had become more than just transportation. It was a reminder that sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best changes, that second chances aren't just about forgiveness, but about seeing the potential in everyone, even those who've made mistakes. The three brothers approached Michael and his mom as the evening wound down. They had one final surprise, a small plaque they wanted to hang in the center. It read, "Every journey begins with a choice. Choose hope." Below these words was an image of a car key, symbolizing not what they'd tried to steal, but what they'd ultimately found. A key to unlocking better lives, not just for themselves, but for an entire community. As the sun set on that anniversary, casting long shadows across the transformed neighborhood, Michael realized that sometimes the best endings don't erase the difficult beginnings. They build something beautiful from them instead.